Okay, so good morning, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started, and hopefully we'll have others join us as we proceed. We want to welcome you all to our panel discussion on the of serving as a grant proposal reviewer. We want to welcome our panelists who have taken time out of their day to be here, their busy schedule to be here with us and to share their experience of serving on various grant review panels, both federal and foundations, private foundations. We want to thank those of you who are joining us on Zoom for your participation as well. And so, again, we want to welcome you and good morning. My name is Kesha Henry, and I'm a Research Development Officer in the Research Enterprise and Outreach Office in our College of Education and Human Development. And I will be facilitating this discussion at this morning. So thank you so much. Our panelist is made up of 5 faculty from across campus, from the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, from our own College of Education and Human Development, and from the College of Engineering. We have Dr. Carson, Dr. Holli Leggette, Dr. Shire, we have Dr. Song, and we have Dr. C, who will be presenting today. We ask that you hold your questions till the end of the presentation. So each of our panelists will do a 10 minutes presentation. And then when all the presentations are completed, then we'll get into question conversation and talk about the grant review process and some of the benefits and anything that you'd like to ask. If you've served on a panel before, would love to hear your experience as well. So without further ado, I am going to start with Dr. Carson. Thank you.
No, I mean, I have to advance the slide.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here and talk about something that I've had a great deal of interest in over my career and the benefits of serving on a grant proposal reviewer panel. We had sort of a slide template we were asked to follow, so I'm just going to kind of try to work through that and then and stay on time, most importantly. This is the arrows that I don't see the. Where'd you click? Right. This one. Okay. All right. So just a little bit of introduction. I'm new to Texas A&M relatively, been here a little over a year. I hold the Debbie and Mike Hilliard Endowed Huffines Institute Chair, where I'm the executive director of the Huffines Institute for Sports Medicine and Human Performance, and I'm a professor in kinesiology and sport management. I've been fairly active my entire career in scholarship and research, and including currently. I've had a lot of also leadership roles the last 12 years. I'm executive director of 2 different institutes, an associate director of another institute, chair of a large department, senior associate dean for research. Why I put those out there? I really think that this grant panel review, there was a big emphasis on your own funding, but it's helped me very much in mentoring and guiding related to research and grant funding. And in all these positions, I've had sort of that role in some way or the other. So my research interests, personally for over 25 years, I've run the Integrative Muscle Biology Lab in several institutions. We use molecular biology techniques, both in vivo and vitro, and other than collaborations, I'm primarily a preclinical researcher, and we look at the regulation of skeletal muscle plasticity. And so we look at physiological disease modeling in a variety of roles, and a lot of our funding has come in the area of cancer, where I was also associate director of the Colon Cancer Research Center. So some of the areas that have made an impact are mechanical regulation of muscle transcription, sex hormone regulation of growth, the role of cytokines such as IL-6, and whole body exercise and contraction on these variables. So they asked the funding agencies I've been funded by. I've been funded by a variety, but I'm definitely sort of NIH blue blood. I started with an F-32 as PI, R3, R21, R1, and then at least in the years past, R1 renewed was often a variable you had to have for tenure in some medical schools. And so I've also had a variety of other funding, either as PI or a multi-PI from all kind of Department of Defense, from the variety of different institutes, from the NCI, Cancer Institute, Institute of Arthritis and Musculoskeletal Diseases, NADDK, American Heart Association, and American Federation for Aging Research is where I sort of cut my teeth early on with grant funding. And I helped junior faculty and mid-career faculty get funded by a variety of these agencies. So these are just the last 7 years of grant review I've been on. So I've been very active with the VA. I was chair of the Cell and Molecular Medicine Subcommittee for a number of years. I actually was on the panel for about a decade. Specific to the VA, but funds a lot of very interesting research related to anything that affects the aging veteran, which can affect just about anybody, right? And I've also worked with tumor cell biology extensively over the last decade, including being an associate chair. And that changed to cancer cell biology a couple of years ago. I've been involved with American Federation of Aging Research currently. I'm look at their Discovery Awards. I've been on the US, and a lot of these are ad hoc, but returning ad hoc roles for the Department of Defense, NASA. I've heavily involved in NIH fellowship review, and that had an interest of mine. I really liked that because that pertained, I had an interest in graduate programs, postdoctoral training programs, and you really get to see the meat and bones that go into those and advise students on those to do that. I've been for other state agencies too, such as Florida. I'm a regular reviewer almost yearly for them, and other programs you can see on there. So we were asked to talk about the benefits of serving on a grant review panel. And I think the number one is sort of understanding the process. I was fortunate as I just started out as an assistant professor. I right away from some of my ideas from postdoc at an American Heart Association grant. After moving into that, they asked me to serve on a panel, and with some guidance from my mentors, I did that. And that helped me initially with basically to understand a little bit better the grant process and things that goes into that. So to see how the sausage is made and to be in the room where these sort of funding decisions aren't made, but especially NIH, they're scored, right? And I've been involved with the DoD. They have 2 levels of review, the scientific merit review and then the programmatic review, where they actually review whether the grant, regardless of the science score, is in line with the mission of the funding agency. And that's an interesting process in itself. So this helps, I think, when you see that, you get to understand what makes a high impact grant. Because quite frankly, there's only a few funding mechanisms out there and almost none federally where if your grant is not high impact, it's not going to get funded. And so that's what you want, a high impact grant with state-of-the-art or cutting-edge new technologies, high innovation. Those are the things you're looking for when people talk about your grant. And just to understand the overall role of grantsmanship that goes into that. And so these all lead to being able to mentor faculty and trainees in grantsmanship. And that's where really I was actually asked that in interviewing here at Texas A&M by a senior faculty member at one of my talks. And they're like, we noticed you haven't been doing a lot with professional societies the last 5-6 years. And that was a conscious decision that I get heavily involved in federal grant review at all different levels. And the one thing I will talk about, if you get involved in federal grant review and you take it seriously, it will take time. It takes time to do that. But I felt that was a very much of a more applied role to help my collaborators, my faculty, and others in their roles. So they asked, what is the impact on your own success in securing grant funding? And I really thought about that as 3 critical stages in my career. So that was, I've already mentioned, as a junior investigator, after getting an AFAR grant and standard American Federation for Aging grant, American Heart grant, serving on that panel, it really allowed me to sort of grow my grant writing for the federal funding that came after. And so that was sort of a big benefit to me initially, just learning the process. And now that they might have started when I was coming out, but now they have whole processes where they allow junior investigators to actually sit in on study sections, at least the ones I've been involved with. You may get a grant assigned to you, or but you can actually see the process without having to be a regular member or anything like that. And that's often viewed as beneficial. And then I really didn't get involved heavily with federal grant review until I became a new senior investigator. And I got an R01 and in there, and they started asking me to ad hoc. And for most review panels federally, they're going to have you ad hoc several times. They have a certain number, and if they like your what you contribute and how you view and how seriously you take, then you can look to sort of moving on to the panel. And so I started there being an ad hoc reviewer, and at the time it helped because there's been different moving targets, but some of the forms, some of the layout, the pages, the requirements of an NIH grant, or some others are constantly changing. You get to see how, from when I submitted to some of my earlier grants, get to see how the panel was interpreting those, what goes through. And so that really helped me with, which was a really big goal of mine at the time, was to get my R01 renewed. And so I really think contributing and helping on that. And as I got my R01 renewed, and I moved into I actually moved into more administrative roles. And with a heavy administrative load, also running a research lab, I was invited to be on panels and be a regular member. And I took this on because I thought this was an important duty. And there is a benefit if you become a regular panel member. Sometimes but you can have continuous submission at the NIH. And so what that allows you to do, when everybody else has an October 1 deadline, you have a December deadline. And the problem is all your colleagues are still submitting on October 1. And you're also reviewing grants at that time. So it's not optimal, but that allowed me to get on the panels. And that really allowed me what I like to think of as a decent amount of success in helping junior investigators with different mechanisms. And sometimes this is about my funding, oftentimes I can be a co-I on there. It's sort of minimal to running my lab, but it's an important aspect of what I think I've learned from that. And it's been really valuable in my different careers in trying to promote and mentor and research. So I think I'll stop there. My timer went off. I had questions on here, but I think we're going to wait. Yeah. All right. A burning question I'm sort of afraid of anyway. So. You're welcome.
Okay. Howdy. So unlike Dr. Carson, I have been here since 2014 as an assistant professor. So I started on faculty in 2014. I am an associate professor in agricultural communications in the Department of Agricultural Leadership, Education, and Communications. I've seen a lot of change in this university since my time here in terms of grants. And also I would consider our department among the leaders nationally in our area in terms of grant writing and dollars. And so I've seen a lot of change in that too. One of the things we are social scientists, and so in thinking about our role here at the university, I serve as a lot of PIs on projects because we do lead the social science component, as well as I do have several projects as a PI. So I'll talk a little bit about that experience today and a little bit about where my research interests lie, and then kind of some along the same lines because we did have a similar template. So in 2014, when I started at the university, I was a 25% research scientist and 65% teaching scientist and teaching scholar. So in my time here, my last year before I went up for tenure to associate professor, Dr. Fierke made the change that we had to all be 50%, at least 50% research. And we had to have one grant, federal grant as a PI to get promoted and tenured. And so I already had a grant, and that was fine. But I went from 25% research to 50% research overnight. And so in thinking about that, I had to really change my perspective on how I did my research, and I needed to look a lot at federal funding grants. And so for me personally, that was thinking about what gets things published and what gets things funded, right? And so maybe thinking a little bit about reimagining myself as a scientist and looking more at how I could leverage those federal grants. And so today, I am privileged to be on, which we're now, it was stopped, but we're getting it refunded. Was privileged to be on the largest grant that Texas A&M AgriLife has ever received. And so I lead the social science piece on that in terms of marketing and communications and outreach efforts. And so that's an exciting project. So my research really looks at investigating the methods for preparing science communicators. And so I have several projects along that lines where we train the scientists to also be communicators of their science. And it was kind of cool because just this year, one of our previous students in the program that actually we're closing out in the beginning, won the brain science video contest, and he's a student at UK Med School. And so that was kind of cool to see that come full circle as a scientist, but now he's also winning science communications awards nationally. I also work a lot with PIs to do needs assessment and audience analysis so that we can better target our programming and develop research projects based upon the results. And so a lot of times in extension and agriculture projects, we develop a lot of things for the constituents, but we don't spend a lot of time talking with the constituents, getting data from the constituents on what they need on their farm. And so we have started with a lot of the research projects to get that information that they need and deliver in a format that they desire and the information that they need so they can actually make changes on their farm instead of just getting that information. So we do a lot of action-based research at the beginning of the projects. So I've been mostly funded by USDA, or I also work a lot with Texas A&M AgriLife Institute here on campus and do some food communication and some messaging studies on how do we better communicate our messages to constituents. But most of my work has been within the USDA, multiple entities within the USDA. And then we have some projects with TCEQ as well as SARE, Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education, which is also with the USDA. So I served on a grant panel as I did a lot of this. So oh, that was weird. Huh? Yeah, that was weird. So I had when I first became an assistant professor, one of the longtime tenured and senior faculty members told me that there's a code to grant writing. And he said, you can have a lot of great ideas, but if you don't crack the code, you'll never get $1. And so in my mind, I was like, okay, well, how am I going to learn the code, right? Like, how do you learn the code? You go be a student of the code. And so for me, that was serving on panels, is how do I become a student of the code? So unlike Dr. Carson, where he served on a lot of the panels that he has gotten funding for, I have not served on as many panels that I've gotten funding for, but I've served on a variety to understand the code, to understand the things that are happening behind the scene, but to understand the specific writing techniques, which I'll spend some time on. And so we do a lot of USDA funding. I have been invited to serve on NSF, but both times that they have invited me, I've been in some deep personal trenches, and so I haven't been able to have those, been able to serve in those capacities. But that is a goal of mine as I become, hopefully, a professor at the university. So what are some of the benefits? I think some of the benefits for me as a young assistant professor was meeting potential collaborators, meeting people across the country that had some of the same interests that I did and that I could potentially collaborate with. When you spend 5 days on a call or in a room with these people, you begin to learn a lot about them and who they and what they do. And so it's an opportunity for me to meet with potential collaborators. Also, I really appreciate the opportunity to understand the review process. And so it looks one way putting in the packets, but it looks another way as you're getting the materials, as you're reviewing the materials. And you also, for me, it was one of those kinds of things where you understand what the reviewer is also going through. For example, if you review 10 grants, they all start to kind of run together at some point. And so you have to go back and you have to think about. So for me, understanding that process is, what do I need to really emphasize in my projects early on so it catches those reviewers' attention? And so when they remember me and they're like, that one grant, I remember going back to that one grant. And I think for the panels that I've served on, there's usually 4 reviewers. There's a primary reviewer, and then they just kind of trickle down. And so if the primary reviewer does the main discussion of that project, where the second reviewer then will add to, and the third reviewer will also add to that. And so that primary reviewer, they will review 2 or 3 that they are the primary reviewer on. So what are those talking points that you're going to give them to argue essentially for your proposal? And as you rank those proposals in that group, it's really important when you come back to what are you going to give that reviewer to when all the proposals, all 50, 60, 70, 80, how many there were ever in that pool, is going to come back on in a second time, argue for why I wanted this proposal to be at the top, right? And so thinking about what are those three things or those target points that you really want them to remember. Also, it's an opportunity for me to critically analyze feedback. So now when I get feedback on a proposal that I've submitted, I tend to read it in context of the reviewer, right? So having served on that panel, now I can read that feedback in context. I know the process. I know that there's a primary reviewer, there's somebody who adds to it. And so I can begin to read that feedback in the context of the reviewer. Also understanding that they may have stayed up till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning reading my packet. So there might have been things that they missed. Why? Because I didn't emphasize the things in which I should have emphasized for them to remember. I said on this a little bit, the last slide is learning those writing techniques. Cracking the code, as the senior faculty member told me. And so how do I crack the code, right? And thinking about what are those pieces that have to come, thinking about the language. And so many times we're very focused on writing a research article or writing a manuscript or something like that. And we don't take ourselves out of that frame and put ourselves in the grant writing frame. And so helping me to learn those specific techniques and those specific ways to write things. You know, one of the things that really sticks out in my mind is, on a grant, I always put my objectives very early, like what am I doing here, and then talk about it. And we may not always do that in our research articles, right? We may build the background and the framework and then talk about our objectives, where we're going to talk about the impact and the objectives early on in our grants. This also helps me consider areas of improvement and potential projects. So I always try to spend some time reflecting after a grant panel and thinking about what are some things that I learned? What are some things that I could apply that I learned here to my own? Or what am I not going to do because I saw a really bad proposal, right? And so this thinking about some of that conversation that's happening in those things and how can I adjust the way in which I do things to make it better. One of the things that I think was important that Dr. Carson emphasized was serving on those panels in which you want to get funded. Like I said, I haven't done a whole lot of that because I wanted to get a vast amount of experience in just looking at a lot of different ideas and proposals. But one of the proposals that we just received a couple of years ago that was ranked #1 out of all of the proposals, 98 that were submitted in that round, one of the members had served on that panel for multiple years. And so I'm telling you that because we were able to learn from that experience from a senior faculty member and then later apply that and apply the things in which he had learned. And so I think it's important for us to think about is as we mature and as we're starting to seek specific funding ideas is really serving in those capacities to become better, but also being open to being better, right? Don't be open or don't just be so set on your ways that you're not open to being better. And so as I move further along in my career, there's some goals that I have in this space of serving on panels outside USDA, of serving on different types of panels. But I think for me, not just personally or professionally in like the doing, but this has been a very satisfying experience for me professionally, just to understand the dynamics around some of these different things and also give back to an area which I feel like my profession is really trying to grow in. And so also I can help graduate students who are coming out of my program to be more effective at writing grants. And I have seen that in my former graduate students. They have been very successful. I have one graduate student who has earned $55 million in grants as an assistant professor, as PI and co-PI. I have another graduate student who just submitted as a co-PI on a $200 million grant. So I have seen these types of things come to fruition. So for me, it's not just about me and helping my program be better personally, but it's also giving back to the junior faculty members. I did not put a question slide, so you have to save your burning question.
Uh, I'm a more like a karaoke person. So I love this wireless microphone. Whenever I have it, I'm using it. Sorry about that. Okay. Is it okay to you? All right. Hi, my name is Dongil Song from Engineering Technology and Industrial Distribution. Uh, I'm not that eligible for being a panel in this session, I guess, after actually seeing that Dr. Carson's, 3 stages of his career path. I would say I'm in the like a point 0.5 in his career path. So, but I took Dr. Henley's request because for my own good. I mean, to recruit my collaborators from College of Education and Human Development. Is it okay to you? Also, I'd like to ask you take a photo with this amazing collaborators. Like this, I'm doing a very passionate lecture, like that. Yes, something like that. Thank you so much. That fulfilled my intention. Thank you. So my research topic is about the human AI collaboration. We are collaborating with AI, and then the platform that I chose is the extended reality, which includes virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality, because it's very fancy to implement human AI collaboration. So thankfully, Texas A&M University summarized my research. I didn't know how to summarize my research agenda, but they did. Thank you so much. Transforming education with virtual reality and artificial intelligence. Oh my God, I haven't said that, but thank you so much. So let me introduce my lab. My lab is Einbrain. It's from Einstein. I respect Einstein. Also, my daughter's name is Ein, by the way. My lab is focusing on advancing extended reality for human AI collaboration. So my lab is providing extended reality solutions for you: learning, teaching, and human development, training, and anything, and innovation. For example, thankfully, even though I'm a 0.5 of stage Dr. Carson's frame, but National Science Foundation funded twice for my algebras project, which is virtual reality in college algebra education. In this gamified environment, students, that college undergraduate students are interacting with AI mentors there in like obsolete some kind of warehouse theme to survive in that futuristic environment. Also, there is an opponent there, and he is giving a lot of challenging mathematics questions, and students are supposed to solve that with the help with these AI mentors there. Another project is the Department of Agriculture and National Institute of Food and Agriculture. Actually, the AgriLife received this fund for the capacity funding, and then internally they recruited an internal team. We are developing a framework for shared robotic ecosystem for smart and collaborative agriculture. As you know, that the low-income farmers are not affording to receive some kind of fancier smart agricultural solutions or robots at all. So we have that, and then they can you can consider it like a Home Depot. They can just rent our equipment and robots, and then they can use that. That's our solution. And my lab is specifically focusing on this user interface. So farmers do not have to learn or anything at all, because it's a conversational way. So farmers just using this app, hey, please send weeding robots to my area 1. And then, yes, sir. So we are sending it. They can see the real-time view of these robots weeding for their agricultural situations. This is our USDA NIFA funding project. This is a semi-internal and external grants, Panther Rise. for students' writing processes. As you know that generative AI will give you a complete, perfect version, proofread version for your essay, our grant writing, or your papers, or students, any types of assignments. But if we are using that, students will lose their opportunities to increase their writing skills. That's the problem, I thought. So our team created this, instead of giving their perfect, complete, proofread version of their writing, when they are writing something, this tool visualize what they are writing, so the key concepts and how they are connected to the sub-concepts, so they can see what they are writing better in a visualized way. Another Pantherized funding project is a multiplayer virtual reality learning environment. Now students can collaborate with AI peers, AI friends, and their human friends as well. Sometimes they don't have to differentiate it. Sometimes they can get more help from their human collaborators than the AI. So that kind of interaction and symbiosis I'd like to investigate through this project. Another semi-external, not the federal funding, but Sam Houston State University thankfully funded my research about this medical chat. Their medical school students, they're very successful, but future doctors need to have some kind of communication skills very well. For example, when delivering a bad news, like you have a cancer, oh my God, this is tragic conversation starter, but they should be able to deliver what's the treatment plan, what's the risk, and then what else, something else they need to know. So in their education system, it's very hard to, like 200 medical students need to practice. They sometimes invite human actors for their patient's role, but for example, let's invite like 10 human actors, 200 students. They won't be able to practice at least 5 minutes at most, right? So they are communicating with AI patients with different personalities whenever they want. It's been successful. It's implemented last year and this year as well. We are writing a very good research papers and we are trying to get more fund for that. This is an internal fund of College of Education and Human Development. The PI is Dr. Tuche Aldimeter. I am supporting her research. She is working on middle school agricultural courses. So middle school students are doing their own research projects. And this AI mentor, cute little AI mentor named Aspen, and then she's not giving you the direct answer. It's trained like that. Only scaffolding, motivational comments, and then how about this, how about that, research processes, giving the scaffolding processes. This is another internally funded project. For grant review panels, just a small amount of the panels experience here, Department of Education and Department of Agriculture and Spencer Foundation. Department of Education, we focused on the significance, research plan, leadership, management, and personnel. Similarly, the Department of Agriculture, scientific feasibility, importance of the problem, and investigator resource qualifications, and human subject at risk, and budget as well. For the Spencer Foundation, they are focusing on the centrality of education and importance of the topic, obviously, and quality of research question and direction of inquiry. The main topic, sorry about that, the introduction is too long. This is just a 1 minute important benefits section, but not that many because, 0.5 level. First one is, normally I know that the grading rubric for our proposals, right? But sometimes when I am writing my own proposals, sometimes I ignore that. I want to ignore that, because my idea is so big. I want to focus on this specific budget restriction or guideline or limitation or something. But when I served as a review panel, then now I must follow this rubric portion, I guess. And so another benefit, absolutely, we can know our competitors. You are invited in the review panel. That means you are this semi or very good expert in that field. That means you are reviewing so many great proposals like your competitors. So now you can know your competitors. Also, I learned that the consensus making process is quite hard and very interesting. The other reviewers have another perspectives, and sometimes I felt that they are pulling strings a little bit about their people, something like this. So I had to negotiate sometimes, I had to understand that, or I had to fight against their components, something like this. So that kind of consensus making. But even though it's a small portion of my experience, but top one or two very good proposals, they don't have any objections. So if I write very, very good proposal, it doesn't matter. So that's what I learned. Thank you so much for your attention, and the Q&A session will be followed, right? Thank you.
Appreciate you. All right, howdy, I'm Christy Shryock from the College of Engineering. I'm an associate professor in multidisciplinary engineering and aerospace engineering. And unlike my other panelists and things, I think I've been here longer than anyone has. Going all the way back, I've done some other things, but going all the way back to time as an undergraduate. But I will say, though, that my undergraduate, while it has been a long time, it was after we were 10-0 last time in football. So that, just putting that out there. This is a first for me then in this. So anyway, thank you so much for having me today. What I want to say is, when I kind of talk about my research, is this puts it right here. Disruptions are coming faster and faster. I mean, that kind of encapsulates my research and things there, because one of the things I look at is the engineer of 2050. And how we take that student in 2050, and you go, why do you pick 2050? Because when we think about the skills that student's going to need, you think about how we're going to prepare that student. We don't even know what technologies exist or going to exist at that point. And so it's not as you go, well, there's just checklist, this checklist, this checklist. It's how do we prepare students for a world where the technologies they're going to use and the skills they're going to use, we cannot know them today necessarily. And so how do we help that student? And there's the other part of that, and I have on here students and faculty, because I had a faculty member say to me, if only things would stay still. And I'm like, that's not gonna happen. So, things are always changing. And so even from a faculty standpoint, how do we deal with that? And so if I kind of put my research interest as a whole here, you have this future focused engineering education, the engineer of 2050. There's also some things such as faculty development in here, organizational change. It's also what I look at. AI integration and that human collaboration in education, whether it be critical thinking, all of those types of things. Engineering education, identity, belonging, student development. Also the K through 12, because that's preparing as we think about that engineer of 2050. Those students are starting now in the K through 12. And so that's also part of that preparation and things and that pathway. And then really the data-informed educational innovation. So using the data, I'm an engineer, so I like numbers, I like data. We use a lot of data, but then also being willing to share that and having those open data set, science and data sets where others can also learn and use from that. So, these are just something, and as I was kind of putting up some of the different frameworks, some of the different models that we've come up with, I'm like, wow, I really like circles. There's a lot of circular things in the things that we've developed, whether it be, again, how we integrating the AI and looking at the different components that come into that, everything from the ethics to the learning environments and such there, to even the K through 12 on there. So, some of the funding agencies we're asked, what are some of the funding agencies that we have? I have been heavily, if I put kind of all of these on the list, the highest one that I have funding from is the National Science Foundation. That's one I have most experience with. I've had several grants, though, also funded from Department of Defense, Department of Education, foundations, and then some industry partnerships and internal seed grants. So, it really covers a lot of, NIH is not one of the areas that I have the experience, just in the type of work that I do there and such. And so, a lot of times I've people that say, well, NSF, what do they do? Do they only do education things and such? And so just a real quick, and not that you need to look at all of the words on here, but I did just a real quick snapshot of what are all the directorates right now for NSF. And there's two main ones. And so there's everything from your physics and your applied sciences, physical sciences, up there to biological sciences in the top left-hand corner. But the two main directorates that were kind of my research and my funding and my experience with has fell into the Directorate for STEM Education and then the Directorate for Engineering. And even within the engineering, you're going to see on there, for the engineering, it's everything from, when you look at that, civil, mechanical, manufacturing, but they also have in there the engineering education and centers and things in there. So those are kind of the two main ones where my funding has and my experience has come with. And so then when I kind of look at different grant panels, and like Dr. Carson, I have a real soft spot for the graduate fellowship portion. And so when I look at the majority of my review panels and things have been mostly through NSF, and even with their graduate fellowship. But then I also have some DOD and some NASA. And again, it's that graduate fellowship. Because again, it's really for me of that giving back and also seeing some of the great things that our students and supporting our students through that. But a lot, and I have on there the NSF, and it's been both through the Directorates of Engineering and the STEM Education on there. And we look at kind of, and I have research grants, and then I have career grant. And even though a career grant is a research grant, it's a single PI. And so the process was a little bit different when I've reviewed for that. And I'll touch on just a little bit with that. But research grants, your typical multi-PI, co-PI type model and such with there. So, one of the things that I want to mention, I have a lot of times where I'm talking to colleagues or I'm talking to, how do you even get invited to panels? You're invited to this panel. How did you get that invitation and things there? And one way is expressing interest to program officers. So there is a list. I mean, you can look on the website. You can look. Program officers are, I will say, and this was early in my career, I realized that they're very underutilized in a way that many times researchers do not reach out to them. So they are fully utilized in what they do with their role and such, but many times young faculty don't realize you can reach out to program officers, you can schedule a time, you can have a one-pager for your ideas and just get an idea if this is something that they might be interested in funding. They're not going to tell you, absolutely, yes, I'm going to fund that, but they will give you great insights of, you're considering this program, you might consider this program over here. The solicitation is typically open during the spring or something like that. So that is something that I did not do early on that really you need to take advantage of as a if you're newer into the realm, or if it's something you've just never done before. Scheduling a time, meeting out, and that's also a way when you're meeting with those program officers, expressing interest of if there's any upcoming review panels you would like to be included on the invitation list. So it's something that you can do. And there's sometimes the agencies, they have a review or volunteer form that you can fill out, and you put in your interest areas. You sometimes upload your CV. And so again, they kind of see if there's a match on there. Professional societies, networks, those are also great ways. Letting your other colleagues know that you're interested in, especially some of your senior faculty within your department, letting them know that you'd be interested in serving on a review panel, because many times they get the invitation and they can easily forward it to them. Because again, what the invitation typically says, unless you're at a higher level where that program officer is reaching out to you directly, most of the time it's, we would like for you to consider being part of our panel. And you put in your information, you put in why you think that you have experience in this. And even if you feel that you don't necessarily have a lot, what's it going to hurt? A few minutes of your time to kind of put that in there and things. So just to kind of get your name starting to come with the different program officers. And then so I kind of have the how to get involved, and those are different ways. And then here is kind of the what. So this is the how that I have for the top, and then the what for the bottom, because for the what, is really showing that topical range that you have, different, methodologies you use, different experience that you have. That is something that you will put into that intake form when you are saying. The other part too is I say yes if you can, all right? Not just say yes, even if you're not available and things on there, but if you are, say yes. Because again, kind of that first experience, if it's something where they've seen your name and it comes up and they keep asking you, and you say, well, no. Now, if you have a conflict or something personal, absolutely, they understand that. But if you're able to, really, that first experience of saying yes, a lot of times will lead to those recurring invitations and things on there. So, when I kind of said, okay, why serve on panels? What are the benefits? What are the impact and things? And many of my colleagues have hit this. You're seeing the landscape. I mean, you're seeing what's out there, what's being funded. You're seeing the different type, the way people are viewing things, the questions that are being asked. You're really internalizing that reviewer criteria. And many of you have said that's exactly right. I'm seeing things from a way of, these are the way that other people are asking those questions. Many times when we get in our community of ones who are writing the grant, we're similar sometimes in the way we view things, and having that outside really look at it and take on it in there. And so for me, it's also about sharpening your aim, aligning for that coherence, really being the fact of, you're exactly right. There may be 10 review panels. And I need to make sure that in that first page, I've hit exactly what I have. I've made, they really know what I am at that point, because I've been that person that's up at 2 a.m. and is reading through all of those. And you go, how do you stick out? How do you become that person that rises to the top? Also a little bit too on budget. And I think that early on in my career, I kind of put that to the side. It's like, oh, well, as long as you're meeting their dollar amount that they have. And it's like, no, during that review panel, you realize that they're asking those discussions of, wow, you have an external evaluator on there. Really not paying that external evaluator much. Or, these are the things you're putting a lot of funds. So really helps you see kind of all aspects of the grant to make sure that not only on your broader impacts and your intellectual merit and your objectives and all of these parts, but even all the way down to the budget is scrutinized and looked at with a fine-tooth comb on there. And then when we look at networking and perspectives and connections, and colleagues have said that as well, getting to meet other people from outside of our realm and things is really great. And last but not least, it's service to the field. I mean, you would not have your funding if it wasn't that someone else spent the time reviewing that. And so that's part of just giving back and having that service to the field on there. And so just a little bit about process and things. When the before part, we'll start up here in the top right-hand corner and things, there may be something where you go through some conflicts of interest. I was on a career panel, and for that, there was actually, it wasn't the person that I knew, but they had an advisory committee, and I knew someone on the advisory committee on there. And so for that reason, I was not included when the rest of the panel was reviewing that particular one. We were on Zoom for that, and I just had to get off of Zoom for a little bit while they were reviewing that. So sometimes you may have something where you may not be able to review a certain one, but all of that's just your prior logistics, your initial logistics and things there. The program officer does a really great job of kind of calibrating you. So again, if this is kind of new, these are the expectations. They have a lot of videos you can watch. They have a lot of different material and things you can go through. And then really, and I'll kind of just highlight just quickly because my colleagues have said, but that triage versus discussion, you really want to be in the one where everyone goes, yep, we read this. This was great. This really rose up. As opposed to now they're getting into the nitty gritty details and trying to figure out what it is you're trying to say and such there. Because at the end of the day, you may be one review panel that program officer is going to be holding. And so just because it makes it to the top of the review panel that you're saying, or the top 2 of the review panel that you're on, that doesn't mean that necessarily you're going to get that funding, because there could be a lot of review panels for that particular solicitation. So just a little bit, there's summaries, and yes, it's going to take time. There's writing. As many have said, you may be a lead, you may be a co-lead, you may be, somewhere, but everyone has some writing they're going to have to do, and everyone has to review it, and every reviewer has to say, yes, I agree with exactly what was included in this. So that's kind of all part of that process and things there. And so, one of the things I'll just mention quickly is the fact of, from that panel insights, then that has a great opportunity for you to lead to proposal wins on there. Because again, you're seeing the landscape, you're hearing the words, you're hearing what others are questioning. And I think it just makes us a better proposal writer with that. So with that, I will turn it over to our next colleague.
Good.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Henry's invitation for this discussion and panel. And so I have the chance to discuss with my colleagues and learn from the panel members. And especially Dr. Carson, I just met you last Wednesday on a faculty meeting. And it's great to know you more in this discussion panel. So first of all, a little bit introduction of myself. My hometown is Wuhan, China. Unfortunately, many of you may know Wuhan through COVID. But fortunately, after COVID, Wuhan is known by many more people. And I got my MD degree from Tongji Medical College in China, and my PhD in Kansas State University. I got my postdoc training in the University of Chicago. So my first faculty job was at the School of Medicine and Health Science at the University of North Dakota. Then in 2015, I moved to Texas A&M in University of in Department of Nutrition. So and my research interest is to study the molecular mechanisms by which developmental regulators influence metabolic homeostasis. So in general, this means I study how maternal nutrition and mother's factors would affect the baby's development, focus on, for example, on congenital heart development, congenital heart disease, and obesity, and fatty liver, like liver disorders, and also liver cancers. And we also study the interplay between environmental and maternal factors in shaping the pregnancy outcomes, basically focus on the placenta development and like the maternal mother's pregnancy complications like gestational diabetes and preeclampsias. And we, as I just mentioned, another focus is we study the gene network governing heart development. And so my research has been funded by NIH, HLBI, and NIDDK, and also funded by the AHA for my heart study and the pregnancy-related study. And I also got support from CEHD to support my study in liver cancer. And so I have since I think the other members already been discussed very, in detail. So I try to be succinct, and so we can save some time for discussion. So I've been since 2017. I have been served on national federal level study panels each year for multiple study sessions. So and that NIH and AHA. So and like just Dr. Christie just mentioned how we got the chance first being invited to the study panels, especially for NIH. What I did is I emailed I emailed and fill in the form and show my interest to be joined in the discussion panel, especially NIH. They really support the early stage investigators. So that's how I start. And I guess once you get into it, then you have record at NIH, right? So then you get easier to be invited again. So and same thing for AHA. I did emailed the POs saying that I'm interested in reviewing. And so the benefit of serving on grant panels. So the first is, I think definitely when you go into the study panels, you have a chance to see the winning proposals. And you get to know what makes a good proposal, their structures, their language, and all these things that will benefit yourself. And also networking, you got chance to interact with at least 15, many times 30, and members who has doing great works and having fantastic, the research experience. You get to learn from them and get to know what they are thinking about and their points of in this research field. And also you got a chance to interact with the POs and have an idea for especially each study panels, what kind of research and the funding agencies really like. And so next, and I think the improvement is definitely you got credit for promotion and tenure. Yeah, you write it in your CV and shows, hey, this is my impact in the field. And you have to recognize me and give me promotion, right? So I think that's one of my, definitely one of my motivation. And yeah, so the fourth is that you understand the funding mechanisms. I think that's also very important because in some of the panels that I join is really some special panels for NIH. So they have very special missions and priorities. And when you join them, then you have a deeper understanding that the funding agency, what kind of funding agency, kind of research the funding agency give you the priority. So you can really write, and also the language and the keywords you want to use, so you can help you to write your proposals. And the last is intellectual stimulation and the skill development. You definitely get to know when you discuss with your panels, there's always some idea, exchange and also brainstorm that help you to think more and look deeper into specific questions. And also you got chance to see innovative studies, innovative ideas, at least 3 years ahead of the publication that benefit your research. So I think that's a major benefit, and definitely sometimes you got a little bit tip from your review, like NIH pay 400 per day, but HA is definitely you volunteer and don't get any pay. So, and I also want to mention the downsides, and definitely there's downsides. First of all, it's very time consuming for myself. For each NIH proposal, I spend a whole day to work on it. So this is definitely time consuming, but on the other hand, one of the motivation I joined the study panel is that especially for NIH, you got 2 weeks extension of the submission. So you basically got 2 weeks additional time to write on your proposal. So that is also one of my major motivations, because those 2 weeks sometimes really counts. And yeah. So, and that's the major, that just, but I think definitely this is, you can ignore downside. And so how can serving on the review panel can help you to secure external grant funding? So first, definitely, you deep understanding the reviewers' criteria. So sometimes when you read the review criteria, and they really have languages behind it. So, and when you join the study panels, you got to know some of their language and got to learn what they really means. So I think that's one of the benefits I joined the review I got when I joined the review panel, and also insight into the panel dynamics and some of their review, some of their comments is really not showing in the comments. You only get it when you are involved in the discussion, and definitely help you to improve the grantmanship. Especially, I've been multiple years served on the K grant for NIH for mentorship. So I could say myself knows how to write a good help the student, the trainees to write a good career development plan and a good mentor plan, maybe, and also for reviewing the joining the NIHR1 grant, then you get an idea the structures. When you read multiple proposals, you at least know that what's the best structures that make your ideas more clear, being laid out. So, and yeah, definitely last is networking. A few times I joined go to the meetings and met colleagues. They will say, hey, I think I met you on this study panel. I was like, yeah. So it's definitely increased chance for networking. So I think that's all. And thank you.
Okay, so there you have it. Thank you so much. Wonderful information, great information for some of our faculty who are considering serving on grant panels. I have had the opportunity to serve on some of USDA grant panels myself and really enjoy the experience. I've done it for the last 5 years. I did some earlier this year and really enjoyed that process. And many of the points, if not all the points you've mentioned about the benefits, really help you in becoming better in your own grantsmanship and your career development. You mentioned help in promotion and tenure. That's important as well. So thank you for sharing that. We are going to take questions. We have some people on Zoom, so we'll see if we have any questions there, but also from our audience. What are some of the questions you'd like to ask our panelists? You've seen that they've served on many of these federal panels that you may be interested in applying to for funding, from NSF, NIH, US Department of Education, DOD, NASA, and others, foundations. So their experience is quite extensive. And so I think it'll be useful to ask some of the questions that you may have in mind.
Might want to use the, take a microphone to our.
Sure.
Aaron always has great questions, so I'll.
And if you don't mind passing the microphone.
I'll ask my second question first.
So thank you all for volunteering your time. My question has to do with maybe a decade forward looking. So I try to think about, PhD students. We're preparing them for a job they'll get 10 years from now. And I agree with the fact that there's changes coming rapidly, that it seems as though when I got into my PhD, then there was a very smooth rhythm and about what had changed is the way in which the grants were submitted, computing versus mail. But in my postdoc, my mentor said, it used to be you get your faculty and then get your grant, and now you get your faculty position, and it's incredibly competitive, and there's a lot more pieces to it. So 10 years from now, 20 years from now, my question is, do you get flavors from other individuals on panelists and in your own experience from your track record in academia of the given weight of federal income versus other sources of ways to fund the lab 20 years from now, 10 years from now, and just the relative importance of eggs in the federal funding grant reviewing basket as opposed to maybe other baskets? Just interested to pick your brains on that.
Yeah, that's a good question, Aaron. I don't think federal funding's going anywhere. I don't think that's going away. What's been true of federal funding all along is that you have to be at the top to continue to get federal funding. And so that's really where things sit. The pool of researchers, say, I can tell you from the National Cancer Institute, over the last 15 years, they've increased the amount of dollars they're putting into research, but the number of applications, the number of trainees that come out are extensive. And so you have to have very impactful questions to get funded at that. If your questions aren't in that realm, I think that's the value we talked about the panel of what would be an impactful question, then yeah, I think it might be harder. And I think the NIH has only continued to emphasize the training of new investigators, some of the others. Mid-career is where it gets a little bit harder. And right now, there's not a lot of initiatives for mid-career type researchers, but there are a lot of initiatives for early stage to go forward. And I think that's one of the benefits you heard here today is, learning what they call impactful grants, what goes in there, and not to be just a colleague of mine once talked about that was mentoring me. There's steering your science to what's high impact and what they're interested in, and then there's hobby science where you just do what you want to do, And you can just get upset if that's not what the NIH wants to fund. So that's those are the choices we get as investigators.
And I might add a piece to that about PhD students. I think for me, one of the things that I do is if you're here to get a PhD, you most likely have good ideas, right? Like that's a thing. But the process is very hard to navigate when you're starting to submit grants. And it's you have to have all these documents and you need letters and you need collaborators. I mean, you have all these things. And if you aren't intentional about training them how to do that, you can walk into a faculty position or a postdoc position very confused about the process of applying for a grant. And so I spend a lot of time with my third-year PhD students. And I always invite them on a grant that we're submitting, right? And I walk them through the process of talking to SRS and putting together the budget and all of those types of things. And so when they get into their first year as a faculty, they at least understand the process. They're going to find other collaborators on campus that will help them develop ideas and questions and all of those things. But the process is so incredibly challenging, I think, for a young investigator as they're trying to understand their new university and they're trying to understand all these things. And then all of a sudden I have to write grants and I don't even know how to submit one of these things, right? And so for me, I spend a lot of intentional time in the third year of just saying, let's sit down and talk through this process of how do we do this? And I'm going to copy you on every email I send back and forth to SRS and budget and all of those things, which becomes a lot, but at least they've had exposure to that headed out into their academic career.
And I think and even though where the funding comes from is discipline specific on there, I think one of the things that I've seen is that diversification is really key. So looking at some of those other entities that maybe you hadn't considered before, or thinking about some of the private foundations, or really going outside. I think that some of the senior faculty in my area have been very fortunate to have longstanding programs that have been around for a long time, and they have received majority of their funding through that. And so that's kind of their main mechanism. I think some of the younger ones are having to go, and as we're kind of seeing things changing, I mean, with federal funding, I mean, I don't think it's going away by any means, but I think being open to looking at other entities in maybe a way that we haven't necessarily had to focus on before.
Yeah. So I don't have to. Actually, that was my question as well, but my solution is not tested yet, but my solution, because you brought that investment analogy, find more baskets and then lay more eggs. So that's my solution for now. Thanks.
In the diversity section, and what I think is the biggest change, and we're trying to work with young investigators, but it also matters where you work, is that writing 1 or 2 grants a year is not what people do anymore. People submit 10, 15 grants a year, and there's an efficiency to it. You need support, and so people that want to get funding submit, because in reality, I think it came out through here, people talk about it's the NIH or the NSF, or it's actually three people. Maybe I heard here there's 4 on some. That's who's reading your grant. And so the more eyes you can get it in front of, the more you can modify your question. That's sort of the standard today. That's where the game has changed, I think.
Yes, I always say write a lot, get a lot, right? But you have to write a lot.
First question too? Did you mention that?
Well, that was for Steve.
I think he was joking.
Got it.
And thank you again for all your time. So my question is, as the junior faculties, what are your tricks for identifying the right collaborators before you even join all these panels? So we're still trying to identify the ones that is the right and to have the higher chance to get the grants from external fundings. Thank you.
So I'm a pretty bold person, so I was in public relations for a long time, so it doesn't bother me to just go up to somebody and introduce myself. But I think for me, it has to be a mutual understanding. What are you giving them? And then what are you asking of them, right? So I have an experience in 2018. I only know this because I was pregnant, and so I know the date and time. But I went in and I wanted this very well-known faculty member in ag economics to be on my grant, and I had not a hide nor hair who this person was. And so I spent some time and I wrote out a concept note and I wrote out what he could contribute and how we could work together on this project. And when I did that, then I emailed him and I said, I know this and this and this about you, and I know where your strengths are, and this is the project that I have. I would like a little bit of your time to talk to you. He said, sure, not a problem. And so we had this conversation. It was a really great conversation. And that grant was not funded, but we are actually working on a randomized control trial project right now through IHA that is a great project. And we've developed just a long-time friendship over that one initial email. So I think as a young faculty member, that was pre-tenure for me, was just getting a solid idea in my head and how that particular person could contribute that project. But I spent a lot of time thinking through, I spent a lot of time on faculty profiles and just looking at who did I need as the expert, and then going and asking that person and providing them with the rationale for why they should be on my project.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And I just like to add again, reaching out to them and not being nervous about that, but well, you're going to be nervous, but reaching out there and getting over, because many times they may not have the bandwidth to do, but they will have someone that they can recommend. So, I've had that where I've had someone that I reached out to and they were on so many different projects that they did not have the bandwidth, but then they gave me someone else's contact information. And now I'm contacting that person because as a reference from someone else that they knew. So anyway, I think that's a really great way of doing that and things. And the other thing is just keeping in mind too, when you're submitting your grants, making sure that the co-PIs and the PIs that you're doing, that you're really looking at breadth on there. Many times, and I'm sure this is just engineering, not anywhere else, but sometimes as engineers, we think that, oh, we can do it all and we know it all. And when you have a review panel that looks at that and they go, why would you think that you're the expert in social sciences or whatever may be and things on there? So really, when you're looking at who's going to be on, your team and things, making sure that you've really considered all the different aspects that you need, even if it's blindly reaching out to someone, and don't really know them.
I'm not as familiar with all the resources here at Texas A&M, but traditionally at universities and others, institutes, centers, or even some society organizations that might be niche specific have very good ways to then meet or even get recommendations of people that might be willing to collaborate with resources. And a lot of those people might even know today's world, you could collaborate with somebody at another institution very easily and fit that bill.
A real life example, I found that Christy is very well aligned with my research, and then I sent an email to her, and then she graciously accepted my offer. And then, although our proposal hasn't been successful, but I will work on hard. Okay. By the way, she's now my mentor here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think that these are all perfect. I just want to add that when I'm a junior faculty and maybe I have a lot of concerns, and I was thinking, oh, well, I'm looking for some senior faculty's collaboration. I probably ask them, do me a favor for me. But when I move into my relatively senior stage, there's a junior faculty reach out to me for collaboration. I start to realize, okay, this is really something benefit both, and I actually appreciate that they recognize my expertise and give me the opportunity to collaborate and do something together. So yeah, be brave to reach out. Yeah.
All right. Any more questions from the audience? If not, we'll go. Any questions from Zoom?
Thanks so much for the discussion. It's very helpful. I just want maybe know when you got your first grant, what is the aha moment that, oh, I got this first grant because I did this. Something very important that you think contribute to your first grant. Maybe it's a silly question.
In the chat. Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll ask you questions.
I know, I don't think it's changed that much. My very first grants were extensions of my training and things as I was moving up and then taking advantage to whatever when I first got my job. And there was the University of South Carolina on resources I had around me to make a team and then go forward. But early on, trying to take those new investigator initiatives that just build right off my training and incorporating some of the environment I'm in, currently, I think is the way I viewed it.
So my first grant, I got a lot of feedback from senior faculty who had written grants broadly and also had written for that. I think the biggest thing that you have to be open to is criticism, right? And so you can't be above like, well, my idea is really good, and I can't believe you would tell me it was bad, or the writing was good. And so I can remember specifically sitting down with a senior faculty member at Blue Baker, and he said, "This is crap. You need to go home and do X, Y, and Z." And I was like, "Oh," but you know what? It got funded, and so like, I guess I learned a lot from that too, of like, he was honest with me and told me. And so I think you have to be open to criticism and allow other senior faculty members who have experience in those programs and who have experience reviewing grants, provide critical feedback to that.
And going on with the feedback, listening to the feedback, if it does go through the review process and you get that back, it's very easy to take that personal. And so now, and that goes, it's like, we have a great idea. And now it's like, okay, I still have a great idea, but did I not frame it right? Did they not get what I was trying to do? And so now I have a little bit different lens, because at first it's very easy to take it personal when you get the feedback back and they tell you, very negatively.
Yeah, if going with the feedback area, so if you go to the first, like getting a large grant, so I was part of some initiatives with like a cancer center and others to do that. And where they focused on was submitting the first grant. And then when you get the comments back, but not that many get funded, is then working with the comments to make it a better grant. What's one of the worst things you can do is have a one-off, which is write a grant, get so dejected by the comments that it just doesn't exist there, because the real work comes in on going in on the revision. And so, University of Pittsburgh years ago, that's what they targeted to increase their funding. But really getting investigators to submit, then getting an experienced mentoring team or mentor to come in and work with the comments. And sometimes it is, you got to change directions, but sometimes it's that you can make certain changes and move forward. And there's an efficiency of effort to do that.
And many are resubmits that are funded.
Yeah. Because faculty are so busy, sometimes that first one goes in and maybe it wasn't completely vetted. And so a lot of times the second submission is what is better vetted.
We do have a couple questions on Zoom. So I'll start with Dr. Brown's because I think she might have to leave pretty quick. Dr. Brown wants to know, when are invitations to serve on panels offered? And I think we kind of talked about a little bit, maybe in some of your groups. It sounds like a lot of it was after you kind of received that first grant. And then is it typically after you submit a grant that you then go on these federal funding and agencies' radar?
Not submit. Yeah, I think the people were talking, I think the panel, I'll let them, we're talking about being proactive early, and then potentially when you hit a certain level of experience, you'll get maybe more invited. I think one of our panelists, Stephen, said, they do sort of keep a record, some of these agencies, and as you establish yourself as a reviewer, you get more invites. But I know we had several tips here about how you have to reach out, I believe.
So the USDA has a database that you can go on and put your name in the database for potential as a reviewer. The other ones that I've been familiar with NSF, I was invited to those, but I had already submitted to those two calls. So if you're looking at USDA, there's a proposal reviewer database that you can put your name in.
Yeah, and I think that's the same, the database, and you can do that at any time. So it is kind of putting your information in there, and then it's almost, if you would think, it's a listserv. And so you just then receive an email about upcoming invitations and if you have a connection or not to that, but not just once you submit. And I will say that I was on the last panel that I was on right before the shutdown. I was a career panel for NSF. And it was not my panel, but there was another one that the program officer was leading. And so I think this notion of just because you submitted a proposal doesn't get you on any list. And even if though you're funded, because there was someone on another where he just said the actions of that person through that panel, he will never be invited to a panel again. So again, keeping in mind that now all of a sudden you're on a list that you don't want to be on that with that program officer. So you want to be very careful if you're going to sign up to do this. And many of us said it takes time. Be ready for that.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Sorry, yeah, I just want to say, especially for NIH, they especially encourage early stage investigator to be joining the review panel. So if you search on NIH webpage for ESI review, maybe you will see the link that you can submit your name and your request there.
Thank you. And our next question is from Sean Hutchins, who is from the College of Ed. And his questions are from a perspective of the evaluator. So are there common elements of a high quality evaluation plan that cross disciplinary boundaries? And in what ways does the evaluation plan factor into assess quality of a grant proposal? So in the College of Ed world, a lot of the Department of Ed will have a separate evaluation plan for a research proposal, right? And so one thing, we do have a group at the College of Ed that does a lot of evaluation of, is this research plan working? So I think that's the direction Dr. Hutchins is coming from. So does anybody have any experience with evaluation plans on proposals? I just kind of a more specific to a Department of Education type question.
So I have heard panelists say, well, this doesn't have an evaluation plan, so I'm not sure they know how, they're planning for that. I don't know if that's ever came down to a decision for me, but I would say that I have adopted the idea of everything should have an evaluation plan, right? Now, I also have heard people say it should be 10% of a budget. It should, and so back to your point of there may not be enough money in this budget for this particular activity. I think that, one of the things that, yes, that's specific to college education, maybe, but we also have a lot of evaluation plans on different projects that we're doing. So I always say go with an evaluation plan. How much you want to put toward that, you should look at other projects that are similar to yours and how much money goes to that. But I always err on the side of how we're going to evaluate that. Is that going to be something internally? Does it specifically call for an external evaluator? But I think you do yourself harm if you don't put at least some type of evaluation on your project.
Yeah, I would agree. And evaluation plans are actually very key in the engineering ones that we do as well. And I think one of the most important things is, and I know this sounds silly and things, but make sure with a fine-tooth comb, you are reading the request for proposal. If it says it needs a logic model in there, guess what? They're going to be looking for a logic model as part of that. So I think just really making sure that you have looked at those guidelines and you have looked at the RFP backwards and forwards to make sure that you're including all that parts in there.
Do we have any more questions?
Yeah, I still haven't got to my question.
Okay, go ahead.
So my name's Corey Douglas. I'm a research development officer and colleague Dr. Henry. So we interact with faculty of all rank, and we are specific to the College of Ed, right? So we help our faculty with their proposal writing, their proposal submissions, things like that. So I have a couple of questions just because we spend a lot of time advising on some of the things you're talking about right now to a lot of times our junior faculty, but also to some of our mid-stage career and even some of our professors, right, that have maybe been out of it for a little bit and are trying to get back in, administrative duties, all kinds of different things, right? So structural question, how many proposals does a reviewer review? And I realize that's not a fixed number every time, but this is because this is advice we give, like, hey, by the way, your reviewer is going to look at 10 or 15 proposals. That's why that first page is so important. So can you maybe just how many proposals primary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary does a reviewer get?
I think it depends on the agency, but from my experience, that NSF grants probably, I think I read 15 proposals, and then for the Department of Education, they already screened a lot, so just the 7 proposals we focused on.
Yeah, I would say usually in the 10 to 12 range on there. The last one that I did, the career panel and such on there, it was purposeful that they were giving us a small amount and we had 7. So again, that was something that they were uniquely doing that was not in the realm.
I would say 12. And then to your second part of the question was how many are we first reviewers on? And typically that's about 1/4 of them.
The NIH, it could vary, but on the type, but like maybe 8 to 10. But if you're ad hoc, and depending on what they think you can handle, you might start out with just 4 or 5, something like that. And then, yeah, it's basically divided from primary.
And then how many on a review panel?
The last one I served on, it was about 60 of us.
Okay.
We'll say the junior people they put on these panels, we often just make them never primary. They make them more. Primary has an added responsibility to present. But what was your question? I'm sorry.
Just how many on a review panel? 60?
No.
60 the last time I was on.
Okay,
I had 60 the last time I was on there. There was a lot of proposals.
Never had. I think it depends on the number of proposals.
Right.
And I think then they try to limit it. Somebody mentioned here how they might split. Yes.
And this is all good information because it's like we're writing to the panel, right? We're writing to the reviewers. So 60 people is a lot in a room, right?
Well, we got to get to the point where they discuss it.
Well, right. And then that leads to my next question, because I saw a lot of reaction when Dr. Thill talked about consensus. So does anybody have, I realize, consensus in a room? So we run some internal seed grant programs and our panels are usually 10 to 15 people, right? And sometimes consensus is hard, right? And so can you talk to a little bit about how consensus works or doesn't work in your experience in your review panels?
I've never been on a panel where you had to reach consensus. So they allow differences of opinion, and then the group in the room votes and sorts it out. And so there are often times, unfortunately or fortunately, if a senior person, some people are very skilled at presenting grants, and oftentimes a junior person or others who might change their opinion slightly to go towards the most convincing argument, which that helps if you have somebody. I don't know how you can write to get to the convincing reviewer, but the panel then sorts it out between the people. If there are 2 different scores, that's why you see divergent reviews sometimes.
The panels that I've served on have like a high priority, medium priority, and low priority. And you first rank them as a group by priority area, and then you can rank them by order, right? So to my experiences, there's multi-levels to this ranking and arguing for a proposal. Which is why, so you have to write with something that sticks in someone's mind, because after you've reviewed all these proposals and you've heard all these arguments, now you have to remember, proposal AB10 and why it's number 1. Or you know what I'm saying? So it's really important to write a convincing argument and to write something that sticks out in somebody's mind.
And more of the consensus building that I've been on in panels has been more, do we fully, are there questions that could be addressed that maybe you missed, and so it's more of a discussion, and not at the end of the day that a panelist can't put what they want to, but sometimes we're on the border, sometimes we're not exactly, and so having those discussions, and usually the program officer does a good job of just making sure, and really at the end of the day, they would like us to have consensus, even though they're open, but it's more, once we discuss things, are there things that maybe you had lingering that someone else caught, or maybe it really should be in a certain way? But we spent a good bit of time trying to get some consensus to at least get within the same buckets, if you will, type thing.
If there's consensus, you don't do a lot of discussion normally with
Yeah.
preliminary score.
Yeah.
It's where you have a discussion when there's divergent opinions, and then somebody could acquiesce, or then the panel votes based on who they think is most convincing.
Thank you. And my last question, and this is something we get a lot in our world. We will have investigators that will bring us their reviews, right? And they'll have scoring and some comments, and they'll come in and say, man, they just missed it. Like, how could they miss this? And so we have our techniques that to communicate with our investigators in that way. But when we have an investigator that comes in and say, man, the review panel just, what were they reading, right? So what's your guidance for those kinds of comments?
Well, that's pretty standard, right? Because in anything writing, the person writing it's the expert on it, knows it. And I think you heard several comments to this panel. You're reading lots of grants that you're at different times that you might not pick this up. I was just mentoring somebody here, and they got a grant scored, and it just missed funding, and a lot of it was that it lacked the methodological detail, and they couldn't get through they could have just looked that up in my papers, and no, maybe not. And so I would take that as a positive that you can now add that and probably have success. You can't take, and it's hard to do. That's why you have other people read your grants, right? That things that you think are understood can easily be missed by people that are even slightly outside your area.
In my experience, there's never a better teacher of succinct writing than writing grant proposals, right? And so, as I said, that first page better include every major detail that you want to be conveyed, and then you can expand that throughout. But nothing teaches you how to write succinctly like writing a grant.
Yeah. And I have similar conversations with my graduate students of, you have so much knowledge in your head. Are you really conveying? I mean, as you read something, you have all of this knowledge in your head that is not on paper. And so how can you get that out in a succinct manner and such there? And I think that it's just the conversation of, you have to distance yourself from the personal part. It's not a personal reflection on the idea. It's that it wasn't stated that they got it. And in a time frame that with everything else they have going on, they got it quickly enough that really resonated with them.
Yeah, actually, I think I'm still learning. I'm still looking for the keys to open the door, but at least I have learned that for an NIH grant, in my experience, I see that what I really want to emphasize is the significance and the impact. So
I have one more comment. So, some of the real efforts, in my experience, are coming in on the revisions. So it's just what you said, the reviewer the PI responding to the comments. And so what you want to have in the next round is that the PI responded positively or was very compliant or to the previous review. They're not going to know exactly, but they're going to see the previous. And as much as you may want to provide a scathing rebuttal or others, that's not going to get you that comment in the revision. And so you may want to think about how you can spin that positively, you know what I mean, to go back in and use the reviewer comment to make it sound like that you were responsive to the prior review and you've improved the proposal.
I just want to mention one thing too, is that keep in mind, for pretty much, I think, everyone that I've ever done, that review panel that when you resubmit, it's not going to be the same one. So, there's been many times where I have addressed every single thing. I think I really have it. And then it goes through another review and they find something else, and it's like, well, we didn't have, I didn't. And so just keep that in mind, is that it's not just this, one shot, second shot type thing.
I know faculty.
Microphone.
No, I know faculty that use that exact same strategy because the DOD often is completely new reviewers, and so some people will actually submit almost the same grant back to the DOD and get it funded. So it just depends on. So I know people, that's just a strategy. Always submit to the DoD because you're always going to have a new set of people reading it. And, and you're not, there you go.
Then my last question is specific to the NIH, so I don't know how this works, but we do know that the NIH has a new scoring system that went live in January. Now, it may not be a good time to ask this question because I know we've had a lot of disruption in study sections, and then we had government shutdown and all the different things. But I don't know if you have any insight into kind of how that new scoring, they factor 1, factor 2, factor 3, they kind of condensed it, right?
Yeah.
How that is working, and if it has worked in the first study section rounds, because I know
I've seen the comments and I've seen the scores, and we've actually adapted that scoring system for our C grants, but it's still there. Significance innovation is a factor. Now the approach is basically a factor. What they've really done is with the investigator, they basically, are they adequate or not, trying to get away with some of the bias of the senior investigators or other, but they're still going to have, regardless of whether it's in the investigator section, they're still going to have an understanding of looking, can this person do the work? But that's been one of the changes. I think otherwise, they may have slightly changed the emphasis by changing the names, but the significance innovation is still there. The approach is still there. But that's all I've seen to this point, I can tell you.
Okay, so there you have it. We don't have any final question on Zoom? No?
Nope.
All right, so I have one final question to ask as we close. How do you think the changes in the federal grant-making landscape and the new administration impact the grant review process? Do you see any change? Do you see any potential impacts or effects?
It's not happening for USDA, really. I don't know. I tend to stay busy with what I'm doing until I need to be involved in something like that. But as I've told a lot of young faculty members, I would use this time to really develop your ideas and write really good proposals, because they're giving you time that the clock isn't ticking right now, on those getting those proposals in. But I don't know how it's impacting. Dr. Carson.
No, I just think you heard that from the audience today, and I see that a lot in mentoring, that there's a sort of morale negativity to what's the long-term future when you see the funding lines, the others, and what's the future. I hear that a lot, and there almost needs to be a morale booster, I think, for the young, a lot of them thinking about, things are changing and there's not a career path. I think that's real, and that's circulated in, the social networks and the other. I have 2 kids that have their PhDs, and that's the same thing. They're asking, well, what's the future of these lines? I think you heard that even from one of our questions today. And I don't know. I don't know how to answer, how to go forward, other than I consider at least trying to be somewhat positive, but I think we heard a lot of different ways.
I was just going to add, just making sure that though you are aware of kind of the current landscape, and if there are phrases that maybe should or should not be included, just being aware of there's different ways to say things, and if there's certain words that would trigger an automatic in a certain way that you didn't mean it that way. I think just making sure that you understand the landscape and addressing that.
I'm very good at following government guidelines or federal agencies guidelines, so I don't have any problems with that. Whenever it changes, I can change, so I don't have any problems.
Okay, so thank you so much. Isn't this a wonderful conversation? I hope, yes, absolutely. I hope our faculty and staff who joined us online and in person gain some great insights, and will be able to use those in their grant making process, grant writing, and also serve as reviewers, right? And find those collaborators and network and all the great things and benefits that you mentioned. So thank you to our participants, and special thank you to our panelists for taking time out of your busy schedule and being here with us today. So thank you.
Just the different applications that we all run into.